And there I was, and clinging to this scrambling net. But I was too numb to do anything, so the British sailors came over the side, down the net, and put me up to the deck.
Of course, I had a life jacket on, and the mermaids couldn't pull me down. I recovered myself on the surface again, and followed by crew, the rest of my crew, which was taken up out of the water by HMS Walker.
Kretschmer's capture ended the era of the individual aces and marked a change in the direction of the U-boat war. Henceforward, Dönitz switched almost entirely to group tactics, wolf packs operating further and further out into the mid-Atlantic. His operational base in France was also expanding. Construction of the huge U-boat pens at Lorient was underway. With their massive reinforced concrete walls, they provided a secure haven against British bombing raids. And from shipyards all over Germany poured the boats to fill them. In 1941, Dönitz's fleet doubled, but expansion brought problems.
As the U-boat fleet expanded so dramatically from 1940 to 1942, Dönitz had to cut corners in training his commanders, in training his crews. He knew that in order to provide the strongest possible force to fight the convoy battles in the North Atlantic, he had to compromise on their training. Younger, less experienced, less well-trained commanders might not possess the kind of insight into how to attack a convoy. To compensate for that shortcoming, Dönitz assumed on himself the need to control operations, to direct a convoy battle from his headquarters.
But one of the prime characteristics of the direction of the submarine war in the Battle of the Atlantic was radio communications. And Admiral Dönitz would constantly have radio contact with his ships. He was conducting war on their behalf, directing them towards certain convoys, directing them towards certain task groups, demanding that they submit weather reports, whatever the case might be. In fact, he was known to have sent a lot of signals which, from a purely operational, tactical point of view, were utterly superfluous. And sometimes it seemed as though he himself really didn't understand the risks he was asking his commanders to undertake. Frequently, in replying to these signals, the submariners were exposing themselves needlessly to danger.
British naval intelligence knew in World War I everything about the position of German U-boats, because also of the radio chatter. They took bearings, they knew where they were.
Locating the position of the enemy by tuning into his radio signals had been written about in an obscure English publication in 1931. Kretschmer had discovered this book during his midshipman training and not forgotten its lessons.
Some of the chapters gave me so much information about submarine war. First of all, not to use a radio, to keep radio silence, and know how efficient British naval intelligence was.
In a leafy suburb 50 miles north of London lay hidden one of the most powerful and secret weapons of World War II, the British government's communications headquarters at Bletchley Park. Their highest priority was to crack the German naval code. This machine lay at the heart of that code. Every U-boat had one. It ciphered and deciphered all the secret messages that passed between Dönitz and his U-boats. It was considered impregnable. The British called it Enigma.
The German cryptologists had taken their steps to protect their messages with the very invention of the Enigma cipher system. The number of combinations was, it has recently been calculated, greater than the number of atoms in the known universe, and would have taken many more eons than the universe has been in existence to come up with the possible correct answer.
Inside this Edwardian mansion, the Bletchley Park codebreakers began the seemingly impossible task of trying to break the Enigma cipher system. At the beginning of the war, 70 people worked here. That number was to grow to 12,000.
The people at Bletchley Park were mostly intellectuals. Many of them were expert chess players, mathematicians, linguists, and a few professional cryptographers. It's important to understand that the breaking of the German naval enigma was a much more difficult problem than the breaking of the German Air Force or Army enigma. The reason was that the German naval enigma was set up by keying books, which told you which order the rotor should be put in and where their starting positions were and a number of the other keying variables. It wasn't possible, really, to crack the enigma without the knowledge of the keying variables organized in this book. In the middle of 1941, Harry Hinsley, a young undergraduate, had the idea that it might be possible to capture some of the keying books from some German weather ships, which were isolated to the northeast of Iceland.
The Germans were keeping weather trawlers up among the icebergs. We knew their positions. And most important of all, though this was a guess on my part, that they carried the enigma. And with that information, the Admiralty went and captured a trawler. It was a stroke of fortune that the Germans had the enigma in those little ships, little fishing ships. It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe my eyes when I thought, well, they've got the enigma. I could hardly believe myself. But they had. And that was an amazing, amazing stroke of luck.
Further treasures were about to be recovered from the Atlantic to help the codebreakers crack the Enigma system. U-110, under the command of Fritz Julius Lemp, who sank the Athenia on the first day of the war, was blown to the surface by a Royal Navy escort group. For David Baum, it was to be the most important day of his life.
Well, I was the sub-lieutenant, aged 20, in HMS Bulldog, which was the leader of a third escort group in the Atlantic. We were there, and Obrisha and the HMS Broadway, an old American destroyer which had been given to us. We all opened fire with all our guns on U-110, the object being to rattle the crew, to get them to abandon ship.
Lemp saw a destroyer tearing directly towards us. One of the destroyers was the Bulldog, and the other one was the Broadway. At the last moment, the Broadway got an order from the Bulldog to abort the ramming.
Abzusetzen. Captain Baker Cresswell, captain of Bulldog, shouted through the megaphone, don't ram, because he wanted to preserve U-110 and just stop Broadway from ramming her.
Aborting the ramming at the last minute was fatal for us, because Lemp had assumed that they would cut us in half, so everyone had to get out. And in this situation, he of course shouted down, get out, out, out. And when we radio operators asked, what about the secret papers and so on, he said, leave it all in there, get out, out, out. He tried to save the life of every single man. When we were in the water and the boat didn't sink, then it was too late to do anything about it.
We could see Obrisha was told to pick up all survivors, and they picked up all the German crew, popped them down below immediately, so they couldn't see what was going on. And my captain ordered a way-armed boarding party and told me to take charge of it.
They rowed over to the stricken sub, with David at the helm, not knowing whether demolition charges had been set or German crew members were still on board. David courageously went down inside the submarine ahead of his team.
The hatch going down below was closed. I don't know why it was closed, but it was closed. I opened it up. Didn't seem to be anybody there, so I went down. But there was a very vulnerable moment there, because bottom first, with both hands on the ladder, vertical ladder, revolver holstered, and I was a sitting target for anybody down below. I looked both ends of the ship. You could see right through to the battery room, the engine room, and then up forward to the torpedo compartments. And didn't seem to be anybody on board at all. Very eerie, absolutely silent, except for the flopping of the waves against the hull. So I then shouted up, got the crew down. And then we started ransacking the place, all the books and the charts and absolute mess of code books, signal books, cipher books, everything we could find. We passed up and into a relief boat. The captain had sent a motorboat over from a Broadway, and that took all the gear.